Hey, Larken Rose here. This morning, Amanda and I were chatting about random things, and we stumbled over the topic of, high school kids rebelling by doing what they're told rebels do. So, for example, we're all going to smoke in the bathroom, because that's what rebels do. So we're all going to conform to the fabricated artificial idea of what it means to be a rebel. And we're all going to wear these clothes, and we're going to have these tattoos and these hairstyles, and we're all going to go along with the fashion and the mentality and the belief system that somebody told us is the rebellious one. Meanwhile, the number of people who actually at that age have the mental fortitude and awareness to actually think like individuals and look around and go, well, that's dumb, that's good, that's stupid, that's just a different kind of stupid. There's not very many people at that age. There are not very many teenagers who rebel against the status quo in some way other than the way that everybody rebels against the status quo. And it occurs to me that absolutely describes almost every voter. Because if you ask Democrats, well, what's the more pro-freedom, anti-establishment party? They're going to say the Democrats. And then 5 seconds later, they're all going to be insisting that we all enrich giant corporations, insisting that everybody get an injection. Because they're not really rebellious and they don't know how to think. They're just sort of doing the knee-jerk reaction against what they perceive to be the establishment. Meanwhile, if you ask Republicans, well, what's the rebellious pro-freedom party? Well, it's conservatives. We believe in freedom and rugged individualism and blah, blah, blah. Until some authoritarian thing comes along and your political master says everybody should go rah, rah, rah for this authoritarianism, for building the wall and keeping immigrants out or cracking down on those illegal drugs, some form of statism or other. So you get a bunch of people, and all of the candidates, they always pretend to be anti-establishment. Trump does it, Obama did it, Clinton did it, even Bush did it after, your entire family is the establishment. How are you pretending to be anti-establishment? But they still have to point at what's going on and go, this is horrible. This waste or corruption or socialism or whatever we're going to label it, that's the establishment. We're against that. And then a bunch of weak-minded, unthinking dupes go, well, good, because I'm a rebel. So I'm going to mindlessly jump on board this gang, this group, and I will let it think for me, and I will let those people tell me what it is to be rebellious. I will let Trump tell me what it is to be against the deep state. Meanwhile, he is the deep state. And meanwhile, the Democrats think, oh, Trump's the mean, scary, he's literally Hitler, but we're going to rebel against him by, vandalizing a bunch of Teslas, mostly owned by liberals. Why? Because they saw somewhere that that's a thing to do. Not because they thought it up. Hardly anybody thinks up anything on their own. Even their rebelliousness is prefabricated for them and handed to them on a plate. Oh, you want to think for yourself? We'll tell you exactly what to think for yourself. We'll tell you exactly how to be anti-establishment by voting for this massively powerful authoritarian party. And people fall for it. And it's bizarre to watch because, and what's really bizarre is both parties can totally recognize it when the other party does it. Conservatives can point at liberals and go, what happened to being anti-corporation and don't trust the man and all that? And now you're cheering for Pfizer to forcibly inject millions and millions of people, and you're condemning anybody who didn't fall for that. You're not anti-establishment. You're cheering for big government, big corporations, and no freedom. So the Republicans can totally see that when the Democrats do it. And the Democrats can totally see that, well, you say you're for freedom, but then you're cheering for this and that and lack of due process and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, you tell them. Also, you do the exact same thing. Because you're two sets of unthinking conformists each thinking that they're the rebellious ones, each thinking they're the anti-establishment party. No, you're not. Now, there's a funny byproduct or a symptom that happens when people actually think for themselves. And I'll use the example of libertarians. Now, the term libertarian is a mess because the people who use big L libertarian politics don't believe in libertarianism, which makes it kind of confusing. They are absolutely statists. They advocate statism light, as if that's a thing. The concept of libertarianism was supposed to be based on the non-aggression principle, which completely rules out any government, but lots of people in the Libertarian Party apparently haven't figured out you're literally cheering for something that is absolutely diametrically opposed to the idea that your party is named after. So I could just say voluntarists instead of having people argue about whether the word libertarian means people who are opposed to aggression or people who follow that ridiculous political party. But the general category of pro-freedom people, we have this weird tendency, which is kind of inconvenient, logistically speaking, but it's a really good sign. We argue with each other. When one of us says something we think is wrong, we go, no, that's stupid. Because people who actually think for themselves, they don't just follow a crowd of rebels to fit in with the rebels like that. That's not being rebellious. If they see disagreements, they talk about it. Well, what do you think about intellectual property? Let's debate it for 100 million hours. What do you think about, ownership of land and how much can you claim and what is it based on and the homesteading thing? Well, let's argue about that for a gazillion hours. Well, are there any limits to what weaponry you can have? Can I have a nuclear warhead? Well, let's debate the principles around that for a zillion hours. We argue and we disagree instead of all just saying, what do we all believe? What's the rebellious that we're actually thinking? And we don't agree with each other. I think lots of people who consider themselves pro-freedom are wrong about lots of different stuff. Some of it doesn't really matter. Some of it's just trivial academic stuff that they know how to do the whole live and let live thing. So I don't particularly care about their theories about the mechanism behind biological evolution or something. But the downside of people actually thinking for themselves is we tend to disagree about stuff. And we tend to talk about the disagreement. And I do this with people I massively respect who are really dang smart because we care about the truth more than we care about fitting in. You know how many Republicans care about the truth more than they do about fitting in? 0. You know how many Democrats care about the truth more than they care about fitting in with their little clique? None. Not one. Or they wouldn't be Democrats. And they wouldn't be Republicans. Because when somebody cares about the truth more than the approval of whoever they think is in their clique or their group or their category, then they have actual discussions, whether it's an all-out emotional argument or just a rational debate about here's the facts, here's the logic, here's the philosophy. But to watch so many people imagine themselves to be rebellious and then either cheer for huge corporations or cheer for dictators or both, Republicans and Democrats literally do both. They both worship giant corporations. They just worship different giant corporations depending on who their gang of rebels tell them is the rebellious one to bow down to and blindly worship and pay tribute to. But it's so bizarre watching all these voters literally trying to appoint a master over themselves while telling themselves that they're independent thinkers and rebellious and there's a bunch of Democrats now who remember the 70s and weren't we anti-establishment and we were individual freedom and to each his own and live and let, wasn't that us? Am I losing my marbles here? Just a few decades, people like Jimmy Dore who are I remember when Democrats were actually about live and let live instead of warmongering and enriching big corporations and blindly believing people in power. What happened? Politics happened. And politics will make absolutely anybody who follows it or picks a side or chooses a party into an unprincipled sheep in a herd of morons empowering their own abusers. And that's what every voter is doing. And almost all of them imagine themselves to be rebellious and independent thinkers, and we're thinking outside the box. No, you're not. You were shown one box and told, that's the box. Here's the other box. If you think in this box, it counts as thinking outside of that box. Meanwhile, the people in that box are thinking, well, that box is the establishment. Our box. If you're thinking inside any box, you're not thinking for yourself. If you're a Republican, you don't know how to think for yourself. If you're a Democrat, you don't know how to think for yourself. Because you're wearing a label which literally means loyalty to a political party that wants to use the authority of government to enforce this giant list of policies and ideas on the rest of the world by way of government power. If you wear the label Republican or Democrat, you are absolutely pro-authoritarian, and you are absolutely in favor of a giant centralized monstrosity forcing your view on everybody else, while imagining yourself to be all about freedom and individual freedom and independent thinking. We have to be free to think for ourselves, unless you disagree with me, and then you should get stormtroopers kicking down your front door. It's just, it's so pathetic. Now, once again, to try to look on the bright side, the fact that people want to imagine themselves to be rebellious and anti-establishment, they want to think they're the ones in the movie standing up against the authoritarian status quo. Zero Democrats are, zero Republicans are. They're all bootlickers of 2 boxes full of authoritarian control freaks. But at least the fact that they want to think of themselves that way, rather than proudly saying, I do whatever I'm told, I don't think for myself, I just blindly follow my master. If they were openly saying that, there would be no hope for them. The fact that they imagine themselves to be independent and free and blah, 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 and then make stupid excuses for being in their comfortable little clique of follower sheep bootlickers, right or left, at least they expressed the desire to be that, which gives me a little bit of hope. Because if they can be shown that believing in government and political masters is 100% incompatible with truth, with freedom, with justice, with thinking for yourself, with owning yourself, with being an actual, independent, responsible, moral human being. If they can be brought to the point that they recognize that, then them wanting to be free and independent and a thinking individual and open-minded but also thoughtful, and then that can lead them in the right direction. But until then, as long as they believe in government and political authority and all that nonsense, they're going to see one set of crap and think, well, I'm against that. And then whispering in their ear will be the other set of crap going, well, then join us. We're against that. We're the rebels. Trump is anti-establishment. Haven't you heard? The tax and spend, warmongering, authoritarian, control everything, dictatorial mindset, anti-establishment, tyrant on a throne violently controlling people. So, once again, lots of people have good motives, and then they have their statist indoctrination on top of that, which makes them into just completely convoluted, oxymoronic, intellectual messes who don't know what the hell they are or what the hell they want. But if they could be freed from their belief in authority and government, which is the focus of pretty much everything I ever do, if they could be freed from that, then their desire to be thinking people and free people and independent people and live and let live people and protect innocent people from nasty people, then they could be all those things as voluntarists and actually be those things and actually be anti-establishment and actually be pro-freedom and actually think outside the box and actually think at all unlike anybody who falls for the political game. So yeah, if you vote for a master while thinking you're being rebellious and anti-establishment, you're not. And if you're letting somebody else tell you what it is to think for yourself, you haven't thought for yourself enough to realize, oh, that's not how it works. To think for yourself, by definition, you don't get shortcuts. You don't get to blindly follow somebody and pretend to be rebellious and anti-establishment. You don't get to be the teenager that, well, I wear black and I have black lipstick and eyeshadow and I look gloomy, so I'm a rebel, right? No. You're just following a different herd in a slightly different direction. If you're ready to stand on your own, like a sovereign individual, like a human being who owns himself, you have to outgrow all of the belief in authority.